Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, Luigi Nicholas Mangione has been indicted for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Plus, police begin looking for a motive in yesterday's Madison, Wisconsin school shooting. Chris Beers brings us those developments, plus the latest in two other high-profile killings. President-elect Trump is suing a newspaper in Iowa for election interference. He argues the newspaper released an inaccurate poll just before the election in order to create a false narrative. Jack Bradley reports from the White House. Commercial, hobbyist, and law enforcement drones. That's how the White House explains the mysterious drones sighted in the Northeast. Hear their latest assessment. A key Russian general is dead after a bomb explodes outside his apartment. He was in charge of the military's nuclear, biological, and chemical defense forces. Arian Pazdar has what the U.S. is saying. Israel's prime minister visits the buffer zone with Syria and said Israeli troops are not leaving anytime soon. But Syria's new rebel leader said Israel has to pull back to its previous positions. Jason Perry reports.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Luigi Nicholas Mangione has been indicted for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Plus, police begin looking for a motive in yesterday's Madison, Wisconsin school shooting. NTD's Chris Beers joins us now in studio to break it all down. Good evening, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. Now, tell us about the Mangione indictment today.
Yeah, so Luigi Mangione, the suspected murderer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, has been indicted for murder. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg made the announcement at a press conference just this afternoon. Watch.
We are here to announce that Luigi Mangione, the defendant, is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree, including 1 count of murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism for the brazen, targeted, and premeditated shooting of Brian Thompson, who, as you know, was the CEO of United Healthcare.
Tiff, we also heard from NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch. She condemned people calling Mangione a hero. Watch this.
Let me say this plainly. There is no heroism in what Mangione did. This was a senseless act of violence. It was a cold and calculated crime that stole a life and put New Yorkers at risk. We don't celebrate murders, and we don't lionize the killing of anyone.
The United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot in cold blood in the back and the leg on the early morning of December 4th. He was later pronounced dead. Mangione's fingerprints did indeed match those found on a water bottle and a snack bar wrapper at the scene of the crime. The next big crime story we're covering tonight is the school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes moving into the investigation stage here. He addressed the so-called Manifesto that's allegedly circulating online. Here he is.
We know a document has been widely shared on social media. At this time, we cannot verify its authenticity. We have detectives working today to determine where this document originated and who actually shared it online.
A lot of speculation, but the police haven't verified anything there with that supposed manifesto. Police Chief Barnes also saying they're focusing on the alleged killer's motives at this time. They're looking at documents found at her home, asking people for insights about her life. And Barnes alleged just yesterday that a 15-year-old girl, Natalie Rupnow, killed 1 teacher, 1 student, and injured about 6 others yesterday at Abundant Life Christian Church in Madison.
And Chris, there are 2 other high-profile killings making headlines today. What are you learning about those 2?
Yeah, so the suspect in the Gilgo Beach serial killings that we've been following for quite a while now was charged with killing a 7th woman. Here's Suffolk County, New York District Attorney Ray Tierney.
Today, my office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Yerman with a 7th charged murder in the 2nd degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000. today, my office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Yerman with a 7th charged murder in the 2nd degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000. The lives of these women matter. We as investigators, we understand that. Obviously, no one understands it more than the families.
Rex Horryman pleaded not guilty to killing Valerie Mack. He was also charged with killing 6 other women whose remains were found on Long Island in New York. He pleaded not guilty to those charges as well. And lastly, Tiff, a tech consultant was found guilty of 2nd-degree murder in the stabbing of Cash App founder Bob Lee in San Francisco. That carries a sentence of 16 years to life.
A lot of crime, it seems. Well, Chris Spears, thanks for joining us. And President-elect Trump is suing a newspaper in Iowa, claiming election interference. He argues the newspaper released an inaccurate poll just before the election to create a false narrative. NTD's Washington correspondent has the latest on Trump from the White House.
President-elect Donald Trump is suing the Des Moines Register over election interference allegations. The lawsuit names the paper's top pollster, J. Ann Seltzer, for the final presidential poll they did. The poll had Vice President Kamala Harris unexpectedly leading in Iowa. Trump ended up winning Iowa by over 13 points. The lawsuit says the poll wasn't a mistake, but a deliberate attempt to create a false narrative to influence the election.
And then she brought it down very smartly to 4 a couple of weeks before. And everyone said, wow, that's amazing. He's only up by 4 points. Then she brought it down to where it was down by 3 or 4, whatever number she used. And in my opinion, it was fraud and it was election interference. You know, she's gotten me right always. She's a very good pollster. She knows what she was doing. And she then quit before.
Prior to the lawsuit, Seltzer told PBS that she was mystified by these accusations and takes them very seriously. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers filed a new claim in the New York business records case, alleging juror misconduct. Trump's lawyers claim that New York Judge Juan Merchan had evidence of grave juror misconduct during the trial. Prosecutors say that the claim is unsworn and unsupported. This comes after Merchan rejected Trump's immunity arguments to dismiss the case. He said the evidence in this case does not apply to the president's official conduct, and Trump's objections were untimely and lacked merit. Trump's response on Truth Social was, Merchan wrote an opinion that is knowingly unlawful, goes against our Constitution, and, if allowed to stand, would be the end of the presidency as we know it. Trump's team said that continuing the case would disrupt his transition to the White House, but Merchan said that the decision requires no effort from Trump. A jury convicted Trump of 34 felony counts. Trump denies wrongdoing and says that this case is politically motivated. Trump was scheduled for sentencing last month, but it was postponed indefinitely after winning the election. Meanwhile, a couple of Trump's nominees are making their rounds again on Capitol Hill. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's pick to lead Health and Human Services, is meeting with Senate Republicans looking for the necessary support ahead of the confirmation vote. He's continuing his first week on the Hill. He's a staunch critic of certain vaccines and concerned over the rising mental health disorders in the U.S.
At the end of the day, he doesn't believe that we all need to be guinea pigs, that we need to find out that it actually work first, like the COVID vaccine. It was kind of a hit and miss thrown out there, and we all took it. I'm not against anything. I just want to make sure we go by the science and do what's right and not force something on people that they don't need to take.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see anything drastic out of RFK Jr. I think he's going to measure twice and cut once. I think he's going to focus on the positive. What are the foods that we should be eating to make Americans healthy again? That, goodness, the chronic disease rate has doubled in this country since I was a child.
And Trump's pick as Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has been making her rounds with senators for weeks.
A great opportunity to meet with both Democrat and Republican senators, and I look forward to meeting with senators as we continue through this process.
For all of Trump's nominees, they need the entire support of Republicans on the Senate -3, assuming that all Democrat senators vote against them to be confirmed come January. And it's very uncommon for a nominee to not be confirmed in the Senate, as the last time this happened was in the 1980s under George H.W. Bush for his nominee for Secretary of Defense. Reporting from the White House, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
President-elect Trump says he will pardon January 6th defendants immediately on day one. Our legal correspondent, Arlene Richards, reviews who Trump can pardon and who he might not.
President-elect Trump plans to keep his promise to release January 6 defendants. He may pardon more than 1,000 charged with breaching the Capitol as soon as he gets back in office.
Those people have suffered long and hard, and there may be some exceptions to it. I have to look. They arrested an old woman because I don't think she did anything. They don't even know what she did.
He told Time magazine he will pardon them within an hour after being sworn in. The Constitution gives the president wide and unlimited power to grant leniency. Pardons are not only for those convicted of a crime, they can be granted before legal proceedings begin or in the middle of a trial. Nearly 2,000 people have been charged in the Capitol breach. Charges range from trespassing misdemeanors to threats against the government. Trump can grant full pardons, reduce sentences, or leave the punishments in place.
But, if somebody was radical, crazy, there might be some people from Antifa there.
There are some limitations. First, pardons may only be granted for offenses against the United States, which leaves out state criminal offenses or civil claims. Second, the president can't use his authority in cases of impeachment. In his first term, the president-elect granted leniency to only 237 individuals, nearly the lowest among presidents since 1900, according to a Pew Research Center analysis. Meanwhile, President Biden recently reduced sentences for about 1,500 people and granted 39 pardons. The White House says it's the largest grant of clemency in U.S. history. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The White House has put out another statement on the mysterious drones sighted in the Northeast. They once again say that the drones do not pose a threat to public safety or national security.
We have taken a serious look at this. We have gone through 5,000 some odd sightings. We have added detection capabilities to the region. We've even sent up visual observers. And everything we're seeing to date, our assessment tells us that these are commercial drones, hobbyist drones, or law enforcement drones, all operating legally and lawfully. And we've seen nothing from their behavior, nothing that tells us there's a public safety threat or a national security threat.
The White House said the FBI is investigating about 100 sightings and are committed to being transparent. Officials from the Pentagon, the DHS, the FBI, and the FAA said that fewer than 100 of the more than 5,000 reported sightings merit an investigation. Reports say Biden administration officials are set to give the House Intelligence Committee a classified briefing on the issue later today. Meanwhile, the White House is also pushing Congress to pass new bills that would give federal, state, and local governments more power to address the drones. Continuing with the wave of mysterious drone sightings, experts weigh in on the growing concerns from potential pranks to national security risks. They highlight the need for better detection and regulation. Here's more.
What I would say about drones is it's fascinating that we are seeing such a proliferation of drones. The technologies of flying unmanned aircraft, of course, are decades old, but the 21st century is when they've really come into their own in many ways. First, with big attacks against Al-Qaeda leaders in parts of South Asia by the United States and other such uses. And then now in the Ukraine war, but of course, other places as well. And now we're seeing these mysterious drone sightings in the United States, usually near the coast, as I understand what's been happening, and usually near military bases or the homes of public officials, but again, a wide range of potential explanations. And we don't really know what's going on.
In our view, we don't think there's anything concrete to worry about right now, but that it would be helpful for us to have a better understanding of what's going on in the airspace. We've been pushing for rules that expand the current authorities about what we call detection and mitigation, sort of having sensors set up around the country that would help us understand what's in the airspace beyond what we already know about traditional aircraft, whether that's airplanes or helicopters or drones that are operating.
It was funny when it started. It's not funny now because you've got people suggesting or urging in some cases individuals in their own capacity to take very, very dangerous, potentially very, very dangerous activities against these whatever they believe them to be, and it really needs to be stopped at a high level.
We don't really know what's going on. My guess is there are a lot of pranksters and individual operators who are Americans who are just doing this to see what they can do with their little technology they bought down at some Radio Shack. But we can't rule out the possibility of substantially more concerning kinds of foreign action, and we're going to have to learn more. We really are finding ourselves underprepared even to understand what's happening.
A key Russian general is dead after a bomb exploded today outside his Moscow apartment. He was in charge of the military's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection forces. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pollster has what we know so far.
Police are at the scene of an explosion which shocked Moscow on Tuesday. This video shows Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov and his assistant leave their apartment building on Tuesday morning. That's when a bomb exploded, killing both of them. The explosion scared some residents living in the area.
My wife and I woke up from a loud explosion. At first, we thought it was a drone. I looked out the window, but I didn't see anything. I only heard it.
The bomb used in Tuesday's attack was reportedly hidden in a scooter and triggered remotely. Images from the scene showed shattered windows and damaged brickwork. Russia's top investigator is now looking into the case.
The incident has been classified as a terrorist act, murder, as well as illegal arms and ammunition trafficking.
Kirillov's death comes just one day after Ukraine issued criminal charges against him. Ukraine accused him of directing the use of banned chemical weapons. Kyiv reports almost 5,000 occasions when Russia used chemical weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine. The Kremlin is now blaming the explosion on Kyiv.
We must do everything to destroy the patrons who are in Kyiv. These patrons are also known. This is the military political leadership of Ukraine.
The State Department was asked if the general was a legitimate target, if the killing was indeed planned by Ukraine.
And obviously, he was a general who was involved in a number of atrocities. He was involved in the use of chemical weapons against Ukrainian military. It's something the United States has publicly assessed before.
But the State Department added that the U.S. was not informed about the explosion before it happened. And the Pentagon said this when asked about the alleged assassination plot.
Do not support or enable those kinds of activities. Seen the reports. Don't really have any information to provide.
Ukraine has not officially confirmed reports saying that Kyiv is behind the explosion. Arian Pollster, NTD News.
Israeli troops have been operating in a buffer zone near Syria since the fall of the Assad regime, and Israel's prime minister says they won't be leaving it anytime soon. But Syria's new rebel leader says Israel has to pull back to its previous positions. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Israeli troops continue to operate in the UN-monitored buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-held Golan Heights. But how long will Israeli forces stay there? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, along with other Israeli defense officials on Tuesday, visited Mount Hermon inside the buffer zone.
This is nostalgic for me. I was here 53 years ago with my soldiers in the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit. The place has not changed. It is the same place, but its importance for the security of Israel has only been underscored in recent years.
Netanyahu also said that Israeli forces will stay there until another arrangement is found that ensures Israel's security, which could mean for the foreseeable future. However, Syria's new rebel leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, called on Israel to withdraw its troops and return to its previous positions, according to an interview he did with the Times of London. The new leader also said that Syria will not be used as a launch pad for attacks against Israel or any other state. He also said that the Israeli airstrikes in Syria must end. Israel's deputy foreign minister explained that Israel's actions in Syria are mainly to make sure that terrorist organizations don't have access to highly sophisticated weapons, including chemical weapons.
Assad used the allegation that he used chemical weapons against families and children. Those images are still haunting many people around the world.
And she held up a picture of Syria's new rebel leader. And Iran's supreme leader also chimed in, saying that the recent events in Syria will not stop the resistance against Israel. The Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorist group in Lebanon recently said they had lost their weapons supply route through Syria after the Assad regime fell. And in the meantime, another embassy has opened in Syria. The French flag was raised over France's embassy in Damascus on Tuesday after being closed for 12 years. A UN refugee agency official said that about 1 million Syrian refugees are expected to return to the country in the first 6 months of 2025. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Coming up, Congress has less than 4 days to avoid a government shutdown. Luis Martinez brings us the latest after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A busy week on Capitol Hill. House Democrats hold a full caucus vote for their committee assignments. Also, lawmakers have not reached an agreement on government funding, which expires this Friday. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more on these developing stories.
CR is coming together. Bipartisan work is ongoing. We're almost there. We worked really hard to achieve consensus on a bill that responsibly funds the government into March of next year. It'll go to March 14.
That was Speaker of the House Mike Johnson during this year's last House Republican press conference. And with less than 4 days until government funding expires, Speaker Johnson knows that it will be an uphill battle to whip Republican votes.
But here we are today on Tuesday. We haven't seen any bill text. We're supposed to fly out on Thursday. We've had a long time to deal with it. So it's the same, basically same pattern of behavior.
The holdup in negotiations, according to Speaker Johnson, is the nearly $100 billion in disaster relief requested by President Biden.
It was intended to be, and it was until recent days, a very simple, very clean CR, stopgap funding measure to get us into next year when we have unified government. Or adding to this a disaster relief package, and that's critically important. Also important is the devastation that is being faced by our farming community.
On Tuesday, Congresswoman Victoria Spartz announced that she will no longer caucus with House Republicans, signaling an opposition to the current House Republican leadership. On a statement, Congresswoman Victoria Spartz said that our country is on a fiscal collision course and it will take some courage and structural changes in Congress to challenge the status quo, which is not happening. As a serious legislator and finance professional, not a clown, I am not going to continue being involved in circuses. On the Democratic side, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said that negotiations are still ongoing for a continuing resolution. Also on Tuesday, House Democrats voted for their committee assignments, and Congressman Jerry Connolly defeated Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be the new ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Connolly said on a statement that, "I promise the American people that our committee Democrats will be a beacon of truth and prepared from day one to counter Republican gaslighting." Congressman Jerry Connolly is replacing Congressman Jamie Raskin as the ranking member in the House Oversight Committee, and Jamie Raskin is moving over to become the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable for directly fueling the fentanyl crisis is the aim of 3 new bipartisan House bills. A working group within the Select Committee on the CCP says the communist regime is subsidizing the creation of fentanyl's precursor chemicals. NTD correspondent Jason Blair joins us now from Capitol Hill. Good evening, Jason. What is the latest on this?
Yeah, so the subcommittee working group was happy to unveil these 3 bills that you mentioned. They are bipartisan bills. And as you said, they discovered through their investigation that the CCP is subsidizing the creation of these precursor chemicals that are then used to create fentanyl. And basically what that means is they are giving tax breaks to these companies that make these chemicals. Now, I spoke to the committee's chair after their meeting today, and he had a couple words to say on this. Here's what he told me.
At the same time, the Chinese Communist Party is saying that they will cooperate with us to address our drug problem. They're subsidizing companies to make these dangerous chemicals that are shipped into our country. So it really attacks the credibility of the CCP.
And to put this a bit more into perspective, the ranking member, Rep. Krishnamurthy, said that the CCP is responsible for exporting 97% of these precursor chemicals that then end up making fentanyl.
And Jason, what details can you tell us about these 3 bills?
Yeah, so they are very proud of these bills. They're bipartisan. I will read the names of these 3 bills for you real quick. The Joint Task Force to Counter Illicit Synthetic Narcotics Act, the CCP Fentanyl Sanctions Act, and the International Protection from PRC Fentanyl and Other Synthetic Opioids Act. So basically, these bills kind of cover a wide range of areas related to this issue, some of those being the trafficking part. They are really looking at the role that the CCP plays in this issue, as well as also the money laundering aspect. Some of those are going through banks. And the committee says that it's really the bills are the accumulation of their investigation throughout the 118th Congress and all the witness recommendations, really putting together the most crucial recommendations into these bills. And I also spoke with one of the committee members, Rep. Steele, and she did have a couple of comments on these bills. Here's what she told me.
These bills that we've been talking about it during the subcommittee meetings, and we brought all the witnesses, and we heard that exactly what was going on. So we've been studying a lot, and this is the start. You know what? Financial institutions, because they are the one actually money laundering, without knowing or not knowing, but something has to be done. So we started this, and these 3 bills are really important, and it's kind of a warning to China too.
And the Congresswoman told me that she is feeling optimistic about the 119th Congress coming in next year, and that both houses will be taking this fentanyl issue seriously. Tiff?
All right, Jason, thanks for those updates. And how is the fentanyl epidemic affecting communities across America? Are folks aware that China is producing most of the deadly drug's precursor chemicals? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
How has this fentanyl crisis affected your community?
My community? Well, I'm in Canada, and from Canada, and there's a lot of fentanyl up there as well. Most of it's imported from China. 1 or 2 people are dying every week in my hometown. Every 2 weeks.
We live in Arizona, and it has quite a bit. There's a lot of people suffering from the addiction. Their body just falls apart on them, basically, and they become very isolated, homeless.
We do see in our community, as Dean was saying, people who are obviously addicted, very malnourished, no teeth.
In my community specifically, I've just seen an increase of people who are without housing, and then I see a lot of them like asking for resources and asking for support.
Most of the fentanyl precursors actually came from China. So, so how are you reacting to this information?
It's so easy, like to import it because it's like such a small amount. They can put it in like a letter and mail it.
Pause, like great pause. I'm so busy dealing with the consequences of it, I don't oftentimes get to deal with that particular root of it.
Well, that's news to me, but I try real hard not to pay attention to news these days because I find it disturbing. I feel that most of the animosity that we're aiming at Mexico is very misplaced. I had no idea that it was coming from China.
China seems to be sending the drugs in through Mexico. That seems to be a major issue for the southern regions that are all along the border.
A federal judge in Illinois has sentenced a Chinese national to 10 years in prison for money laundering. He's accused of laundering $62 million in drug proceeds for Mexican cartels. Prosecutors say 44-year-old Haiping Pan worked with accomplices to move up to $3 million a month between 2016 and 2018. They used secret money pickups in cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. The scheme involved converting U.S. dollars to Chinese yuan and then to Mexican pesos, with funds reaching cartel members. Pan was arrested in Mexico and extradited to the U.S. in 2022. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. 2 co-conspirators have already been sentenced, one to 14 years and another to 5.5 years. Authorities say Pan played a key role due to his financial expertise and connections to Mexican drug traffickers. Prosecutors say the case is part of a recent phenomenon of Chinese money laundering operations based in Mexico. Coming up, police are working to determine a motive in the Wisconsin school shooting. A retired police lieutenant joins us to discuss the latest developments in the case. That and more when we return. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Russia accused Ukraine of killing a top Russian general with a bomb hidden in a scooter outside his apartment building in Moscow. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov was the chief of the Russian military's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection forces. President-elect Trump sued the Des Moines Register newspaper and renowned pollster J. Ann Selzer. He accused them of election interference over a poll that showed Vice President Kamala Harris leading the state ahead of the November election. Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the killing of the United Healthcare CEO, has been charged in New York with first-degree murder and second-degree murder as an act of terrorism. The Manhattan District Attorney said this was a targeted murder that intended to cause shock, attention, and intimidation. Police identified the shooter in the Wisconsin Christian school shooting as 15-year-old female student Natalie Rupnow. Authorities are looking at clues to determine her motive, which they said appears to so far to be a combination of factors. And joining us now to discuss the latest developments in the school shooting is retired Police Lieutenant Randy Sutton. He's also the founder of the Wounded Blue. Randy, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here. Now, first, what is your view on social media users obtaining and spreading supposed manifestos even before the police have verified it?
So the reports that are coming out now is that this 15-year-old girl had multiple social media accounts and posted on some of the accounts very disturbing posts, including showing a somewhat of an obsession with the Columbine school shooting that took place many years ago. That's a major red flag, and apparently there were other disturbing posts that indicated mental illness or a fascination with school shootings. That's a big deal. The question is, who saw it, when did they see it, and why did they say nothing? There's also an indication that there's been a manifesto or somewhat of a document that was discovered that gave her reasonings and somewhat of a rant. They haven't given that information out in any detail yet. But once again, another indicator that this was a planned event. This wasn't something random. That's very, very disturbing. Now, the fact that this was a female shooter is very different than what we usually see at school shootings. Usually it's white males between 16 and 19 that take these destructive actions. This young girl lived with her father apparently, and the questions now are: where did she get the gun? Did she have anybody else that was involved with her or had knowledge of this? Some real questions that need to be not only investigated but then made public.
Expanding on that, police are still trying to determine that motive. Now, Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes saying the parents were voluntarily providing information, but that police are still looking into whether they were negligent. Now, we did see the parents in a recent Michigan school shooting charged with manslaughter and sentenced to at least 10 years behind bars. What do you see as the parents' role in these cases, especially when the shooter is a minor?
Well, there's several roles here. One is, were you monitoring the social media of your child? Your child's 15 years old. You have a responsibility to that child to be observant of what he or she is posting online. If these facts that are coming out now are an indication that this was possibly being put out on social media, question is, where were the parents? Now, the other part of this is, where did she obtain the weapon? Apparently, in some of her posts, she talked about being trained in firearms and that she had duped her parents into giving her access to firearms in the past. So this is going to be part of the investigation. Once they determine what factors were at play here, then law enforcement will go to the district attorney's office and say, here's what we found. Do you see culpability here on the part of the parents?
Now, Police Chief Barnes also confirmed that several schools in Madison were targeted with swatting or when false threats are called into police, which is a crime. He said police are investigating what's behind those. Now, what more do you think authorities can do in cases like these to ensure that families know their kids are safe?
Well, I wish I could tell you that there's a way to make those children safe all the time. There just isn't. There's all kinds of things that can be done to try and mitigate issues like this. Having a school resource officer is one of them. I don't believe there was one in this school. The much of this comes down to parental, parental guidance, raising children that are not deviants. To embrace the Columbine shooters as some type of heroes indicates, quite honestly, mental illness and is a precursor to committing violent acts. So parents have to be deeply involved in the raising of their children. It's not just feeding them and clothing them and sending them off to school. You have to be concerned enough to monitor their actions, their friends, who they're hanging out with. Were there changes in her behavior in the recent weeks and months leading up to this? Has she been disciplined by the school? There's a myriad of questions that need to be answered.
Now, on that note of her supposedly looking up to these killers, including the Columbine school shooters, where do you think that type of fascination stems from?
Well, we've seen this in the past. Many of the shooters that have committed these atrocious, despicable acts have had fascination with Columbine in particular, but other school shootings as well. And we have seen copycat killings. The phenomenon is quite startling. There have literally been hundreds of school shootings in the last few years. And some of these shootings have been relegated to one-on-one shootings. That is, for a cause. Someone was bullied. They went after the person that bullied them. There were gang members involved that brought guns to school. But when you look at an event like this, where there was no particular target, it seemed to be that she wanted to target and take out as many students and faculty on a random basis. And that is really where the rubber meets the road when you're looking at school shootings and how random they are. It's very difficult to target hard in a school enough to keep the possibility of this happening. So you try to do your best by putting up security measures, by having an officer in the school, but there is no panacea. There's no magic wand that can stop this.
Now, on that note, I want to pivot a bit to the New York killing of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now, at the indictment of Luigi Mangione today, the suspect charged with the killing, NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch said, quote, "We have seen a shocking and appalling celebration of cold-blooded murder. Social media has erupted with praise for this cowardly attack." Now, given that, do you think that the media or the press in some way feeds into this kind of social media reaction?
Well, I can tell you that watching the reaction to this really cold-blooded murder, when you see a video of this nature, it doesn't happen very often that you will actually see the murder of another human being. And this should cause revulsion in the hearts and minds of the people who see it. The fact that we have a portion of our population celebrating this, almost deifying the shooter, from everything from, quote, social media influencers to United States senators and everything in between. I mean, what you're seeing here is a demonstration of moral rot. I can't term it anything else. And does the media play a role? Well, it does play a role in that, you know, the more that this individual is given the fame, there are those sick minds out there that look at this and say, I want to be that guy. Those are the potential copycats. And then you have others who look at him and want to support him. I mean, look at the money that's been sent to him for his defense. This individual should be strapped to a chair and given a needle. He's that cold-blooded a killer. So the fact that we're seeing a groundswell of support is really, I think, a real demonstration of moral rot in America.
Lieutenant Randy Sutton, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Coming up in the UFC, Conor McGregor announces his long-awaited next fight, but it won't be in the octagon. Dave Martin joins us to explain when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in boxing as Conor McGregor announced he's agreed to box Logan Paul in an exhibition match. Now, will this delay McGregor's return to the UFC?
I mean, it looks like it will. I mean, McGregor was supposed to fight Michael Chandler last June, but he had to withdraw after injuring his foot. No makeup date had been announced, though, which I thought was curious. But McGregor, in making this announcement today, said, quote, I am in preliminary agreements with the Ambani family to face Logan Paul in a boxing exhibition in India. I have agreed. I will then seek my return to the octagon. Now, a date for this boxing match, though, has not been announced, so we don't know when a return to the UFC is going to happen. But anyway, for McGregor, this would mark his second boxing match, and his first one, Floyd Mayweather TKO'd him in the 10th round in 2017. Logan Paul, meanwhile, he's also faced Mayweather, but that was in an exhibition. That match actually ended in a draw, believe it or not. Now, Paul, like his brother Jake Paul, who, if you remember, fought Tyson last month, he's also a YouTube sensation, but he's also kind of a big WWE wrestler. In any case, I think this fight could have just as much draw as the Tyson versus Paul match last month that we all tuned in to watch.
Well, looking at football news, Indiana coach Kurt Cignetti was named the AP's Coach of the Year Tuesday. That's after leading the Hoosiers to a school record 11 wins. Yeah, he definitely had my vote. You know, never had this program in over 100 years of play, even won 10 wins. He comes down to his first season, goes 11-1. The year's not over. They play Notre Dame Friday in the playoffs. He actually kind of flew under the radar because before this year, he had coached at smaller schools in Division II. I mean, his previous stop was at James Madison. They were at National Power's first 3 seasons as an FCS program. They made the jump then to the higher FBS level. Didn't even skip a beat. I mean, they won the Sun Belt Conference both his seasons. But I don't think anyone, maybe besides him, saw this turnaround coming, though. He promised immediate success when he was hired. I'm shocked, though, at the amount of success. I mean, at Indiana, just having a winning record is usually considered a success. So this honor is very well-deserved. Well, shifting gears to NBA news, the league has announced a revamped All-Star game, which will now be a 4-team, 3-game tournament. How does this new format work? Yeah, well, 3 of those 4 teams are going to be made up of 24 All-Star players. They'll be drafted into teams of 8, and they'll be drafted by the 3 analysts of TNT's popular show Inside the NBA. So that's going to be Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, and Kenny Smith. So you have Team Shaq, Team Charles, and Team Kenny. Now, the 4th team will be whichever team wins that Rising Stars competition that they play on Friday. That's rookies against second-year players. And then the games themselves, there's going to be just the first to 40 points, no time limit. It all takes place on that one day, February 16, which is going to be a Sunday, which is normally the day that we'd have the All-Star game. Now, to add incentive to this, there's going to be a nearly $2 million pool with $1 million going to the winning teams. So that's like, what, $125,000 per person. So I'm really actually looking forward to this new format. I mean, I'd actually kind of grown sick of watching the All-Star games because they really didn't play defense after a while. Hopefully with the incentives, we see some actually, competitive games here. Well, tonight in the NBA, Milwaukee plays Oklahoma City for the NBA Cup title. Now, how significant is this game in determining the real champion come June?
Yeah, I would say actually not very much, and that has nothing to do with these two teams in particular. I think both these teams are playoff teams. In fact, if they're both healthy, I think both these teams are going to make deep runs in the playoffs. But the NBA Cup is really more about a way to gain headlines, to me anyway, during football season than to see who the best team is. I mean, the group play round is just 4 games, and then the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, there's just single elimination. The actual playoffs in June is based on their entire 82-game schedule, and then all 4 playoff rounds are best of 7, so you get to a much truer champion. Now, case in point, the Lakers won last year the NBA Cup, and then they lost in the first round of the playoffs. But, I mean, the NBA got their headlines, so, I mean, we're talking right now, too, so the NBA, I think this is still working for them, just trying to get some kind of headlines during football season.
Yes, we fell for it. Well, Davis, always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, too.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.